Alright guys, so today we're going to be building the four basic parent functions that we look at in Algebra 1. Alright, we have four basic functions that we look at, and these are all what we call the parent functions, which means it's as simple as it gets. There's no addition, no subtraction, no multiplication, no division. Those things will come in time, and those will affect what the graph looks like, but the graph will still have the same basic shape as the parent function, and that's why these are called the parent function. Now, as we're building this, we're going to build this from the perspective that you already know how to do these, believe it or not. You may not have seen the graph before, but you already know. We're going to look at each one from -2 all the way up to up to +2. So we're going to put each of these numbers in for x, and we're going to find out what we get for y. Now, the first one, of course, is very straightforward and simple. -2 goes in for x. That means y equals, and just put the -2 in for x, y equals -2. Same thing for -1. No matter what you put in for x, you get the same number out for y. Now, if I look at each of these as a point, I can now graph my function. So I go -2, -2. I go -1, -1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, 2. And hopefully you see here a pattern. This pattern should be quite painfully obvious that each time we're going up 1 and over 1, we have this same pattern. It's going to be a straight line, right? If I could predict what would happen out here when x is 5. You should be able to predict what happens. Now, the idea that we're looking at is just the basic idea right now, though, is that it is a straight line. In the next video, we'll talk about some of the important points dealing with this, but for now, all we're going to do is recognize that this is a straight line, and because of that, it's called a linear graph. Okay? And that's the basic thing. Watch the next one for some more details. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. Okay, the next one has y equals x squared. So again, we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to put in x values, get out y values. We'll put in the same numbers, because I want you to see that this is not because I'm putting in different numbers. It's just how the functions look. Okay, so I put in -2, so y equals -2, and anytime I substitute, it's in parentheses, so -2 squared. We're starting to see the value of what we did in that first unit now, right? Where we're substituting and remembering to substitute in parentheses. We know what to do with the exponents. -1 squared is -1 times -1, which is +1. 0 squared, of course, is 0. And then we get y equals 1 squared and y equals 2 squared, which then is 1 and 4. Again, I can put these down as points, right? So -2, 4. Nope, don't do that. Just put down the point. -1, 1. 0, 0. 1, 1. 2, 4. And so now I've got my points down, and you'll notice that this one has a curve to it. It's not straight like the other one was. It's got a little bit of a curve to it. Then it goes like this. Note that at the bottom it is curved. Okay, it's not a sharp V. It's more of a U. So note that. We'll talk about that again in the next video. All right, so now let's build the y equals absolute value of x. No, this is not 1 times x times 1. This is absolute value. Now, for those that haven't seen absolute value before, what it is absolute value is defined as the distance from 0. Okay, so what this is if I'm looking at a number line, how far are these numbers from 0? Now, distances are always going to be positive, right? If I have a specific distance, I'm never going to say that I am -2 meters away from you. It's just 2 meters. It doesn't matter if I'm in front of you or behind you or to the side. The distance is always going to be a positive number. So just like we did in the other ones, we're going to create a table. So we're going to go, x here and y there. And again, we'll use exactly the same numbers. And if I put this in, it'll be y equals the absolute value of -2. Well, how far is -2 from 0? Well, it is 1, 2 spaces away. So I can put a 2 there. Then I got y equals -1. And so how far is -1 from 0? Well, it's 1 space away. You can see that by looking at the number line right here. So 1. 0, of course, is 0 away. 1 and 2. That should be fairly straightforward. Okay? So we go over here and we say at x equals negative 2, y is 2. At x equals negative 1, y is 1. At 0, we got 0, 0. At 1, it's 1. And then at 2, 2. So there you go. Now this one, note, it doesn't look like a nice smooth curve and the pieces aren't changing. It's almost a straight line, except the straight line has a bend in it right there. Okay, so we go, whoop, don't do that. There we go. And so we've got our nice straight line. Okay, so we had our linear, we had the one with the squared, which is a quadratic, which we'll talk about again in the next video. Okay, this one is the absolute value, which is also called the modulus, just so that you're familiar with the term. It gets used from time to time. And this one, the x is an exponent, so this is called an exponential. And let's see what happens here. So again, we'll put in the values, x and y. We'll go negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2. Now be careful with this because you know how to do this. Don't you dare do this wrong, because you know how to do 2 to the power of negative 2. That's why we did what we did in the last unit. 2 to the negative 2 is the same thing as 1 over 2 squared, right? A negative exponent, you can move to the bottom of the fraction, which then is 1 over 4. Now, a lot of students find that it's easier to put this as a decimal, 0.25. Okay? We do the same thing with negative 1. Y equals 2 to the negative 1, which is 1 over 2, which is 1/2, or 0.5. Y equals 2 to the 0, and we know that anything to the 0 power is 1. And then 2 to the first power would be 2, and 2 squared would be 4. And so we've worked it out, right? We've got the points here, so let's see what this one looks like. And it's going to be different from the other three. So if I go to 2, 4, that's an easy point. I can go to 1, 2, and that's another easy point, and 0, 1, which is right there. Now, negative 1.5 means I go to negative 1 and then up halfway, so maybe right there. And then negative 2 is at 0.25, so I'm getting closer. Don't do that. There we go. Okay, so I've got the line. Now, I'm going to draw the line in here, but one thing that we need to recognize is, well, as this goes down, is it going to cross the x-axis, or is it just going to get closer and closer? Is it just going to keep sloping down like that? Well, if you think about this, well, is there any way for this to become negative? If I put in negative 2, it gave me a quarter because it was 1 over 2 squared. What if I put in negative 100, right? That's just 2 to the negative 100, which is 1 over 2 to the 100 power. Is that a negative number? Does it go below 0? No. In fact, what happens is as I put more negative numbers in here, I end up just getting a bigger number on the bottom of the fraction. So I do 1 divided by a really big number. And if you take 1 and you divide it by a really big number, you're going to get something that gets smaller and smaller and smaller, but never negative. And so it's going to get closer and closer to 0. And so as we draw our line in, we want to show that we're going through the points and not crossing 0. Again, note that I have arrows on all of these because I chose negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, but I could have just as easily chosen 3 and gotten the next point, or 4, or negative 3 and negative 4 and got those points. These are just the values that I chose so that you could see that the center of each of these graphs is very, very different depending on the type of function. All right, so this is the end of this video. Watch the next one and get some important values.